The crossover event of a generation continues. As the Dark Knight and the Merc with the Mouth are ready to cross paths yet again, this and many more in the pages of DC Marvel Batman Deadpool issue number 1. What'll happen next? Well, let's hop on in together and find out, shall we? Alrighty then, so the DC side of this big 2 crossover we can see actually does a little work setting the stage. We see 2 all-powerful godlike entities representing both the DC and Marvel universe respectively meeting in a bar for all-powerful cosmic beings like themselves, meaning that everything we see from this point on is basically 2 universes boning. And why yes, the great Dan Mora did indeed draw this, and this is a big enough occasion that Grant Morrison even came back to write Batman again. How about that? Now as the story begins proper, we're in Gotham City. Batman comes to the home of one Victor Gover. Don't know who this guy is? Well, he's actually something of a deep cut. He's the second villain to use the codename Sportsmaster, and as the Dark Knight finds him, he is quite distraught. It seems that his beloved wife was actually shot dead in the crossfire of a battle between himself and the agents of Checkmate. Waller thinks that Sportsmaster might have insight into a powerful superweapon, and now to try and safeguard against any future bloodshed, Batman has decided to try and find this weapon first. However, all he ends up finding is a trail of some very strange death and destruction, including some corpses that look like they have been aged to death, as well as other batarangs. Before Batman can truly unpack all of these discoveries, though, the 2 universal beings end up copulating even harder, and in doing so, end up warping and intermingling the DC and Marvel universe as we know them, meaning we next check on in with Deadpool, who is trapped in a strange room with, count 'em, 1, 2, 3, and finally a 4th wall, wherein he is free to address the reader directly. My personal favorite thing is that one of the walls has some truly excellent graffiti on it, and I'm not just talking about the names of other 4th wall breaking characters, including She-Hulk and Gwenpool, and even, of course, who could forget Animal Man, a hero we only probably know as well as we do because of Grant Morrison's work on them. And yes, before you even have to ask, this is most definitely one of those stories. How weird, out there, and meta can we get? And I suppose it only makes sense. Deadpool is a character known for these kind of shenanigans, and Morrison kinda made it their whole trademark, yeah? That stuff's all great on its own, but it's actually the message on the wall that really stuck with me. The plot need not be the best possible, which is honestly how I felt about most of these crossovers, but I digress. It's after that Deadpool and Batman actually end up meeting up for the very first time, and yes, you heard me, first time. Deadpool actually has memory of the Marvel side of this crossover that we already saw, but here's the twist. That was actually a different Batman from across the multiverse, where I think this Batman, given that he's wearing the blue cape right now, I believe is actually the main continuity Batman. Either way, the Dark Knight is sure to assert his dominance over the Merc with the Mouth right away, judo flipping him. Deadpool even saying, oh geez, I guess we know whose crossover this is. In fact, there's actually a lot of that kind of goes throughout this collection of stories where the DC heroes really need to assert themselves as the leads, where in the Marvel stories they kind of called it more down the middle. Either way, Wade and Bruce make their way around this strange otherworldly location that is filled to the brim with references like a Florida bar called Amalgam that just so happens to feature art and famous panels from the last set of DC Marvel crossovers, as well as Batman poking endless fun at the idea that Deadpool himself is kind of a ripoff of Deathstroke. No, I'm Wade Wilson, I'm an anti-hero, totally different beast, don't you know? Another thing I actually found compelling about how Morrison writes the dynamic between these 2 characters is that over in the Marvel book, Batman was kind of annoyed by Deadpool's shenanigans, but here he takes the whole thing a lot more silently and stoically, saying that he normally hangs out with kid sidekicks, and that he's used to having his ear talked off. The story also finds a fun way around Batman's no-kill rule by having Deadpool and Batman come face-to-face not with flesh and blood enemies, but instead cartoon ninjas. Wade questions if Batman even could get hurt or die, because it seems that he has the greatest superpower of all, not a healing factor, but plot armor. A funny statement that is instantly undercut as Batman is perforated by hundreds of ninja arrows. But where are they right now, and who exactly is controlling this trippy, messed up situation? Well, you won't be shocked to discover it's It's none other than Cassandra Nova, classic X-Men foe, and you guessed it, Grant Morrison invented villain. It seems that the artifact that Batman was after at the beginning of the story is actually capable of killing Cassandra Nova. She couldn't let that happen, and because of that, she hired Deadpool to track him down before eventually trapping them both inside her mindscape. And hey, because they're not in the physical world right now, that means anything goes, up to and including Deadpool finding a Lazarus pit to bring Batman back to life. And hey, look at the portraits on the wall. Made up of characters who regularly control death in their own universes, including the Black Flash, Hela, even Mistress Death, and Death from Sandman. Now, the Lazarus Pit gamble ends up working, but not at all how Deadpool envisioned. Batman returns, but not as himself, as the Amalgam Darkclaw, who proudly declares himself the only Batman in the entire universe with a healing factor. And I mean, yeah, I guess that's kinda true. I also personally just kinda love the idea that it doesn't matter where Deadpool goes in the multiverse, even if he goes over to other companies, he just cannot escape Wolverine. The two have themselves a knockdown, drag-out fight over a couple pages before the comic ends up pulling back to reveal that they have actually been fighting on a giant typewriter this whole time. One that just so happens to be recording the story as it takes place. Now, how the hell are they going to get out of this situation? Well, out in the physical world, Damian Wayne Robin actually ends up giving his father the edge, smacking Cassandra Nova upside the head. And I mean, you just knew Damian had to be involved in this story at some point. He is Grant Morrison's original creation and maybe one of their most endearing additions to DC Comics, certainly to the Batman mythos. Now that Batman and Deadpool are free from Nova's mind, they can get back on track trying to find this deadly weapon that everyone has been gunning for. Only here's the thing, the weapon in question isn't like any weapon you've ever seen before. It's a typewriter, a cosmic typewriter. A powerful artifact that once belonged to a real deep-cut Suicide Squad member by the name of the Writer. And of course, if you are a longtime Suicide Squad fan like I am, then you already know that the Writer is straight up just Grant Morrison themselves. Yes, that's right, Grant wrote themselves into the story, everybody. Eat your heart out, Deadpool. I think we all know who the most meta character of all time is. Now, the Writer isn't evil, quite the opposite. He wants to help. He even reveals that the Batman we saw at the beginning of this story already died due to plot reasons. Oops. The Writer also says that try as she might, Cassandra Nova will never actually be able to weaponize the cosmic keyboard, even when she tries to use her psychic powers to gain control of the Writer. Why is that? Well, he has already written her to have a terrible case of writer's block. The Writer says not to worry, it happens to the best of us. As far as what happens to him when he has writer's block, well, he just simply gives birth to a brand new amalgam, Deadbat, which is of course exactly what it sounds like, the bankrupt combination of two of the most marketable comic book cash cows ever conceived, with just enough power to bring this story to a close. Batman and Deadpool decide to go their separate ways. Wade will bring Nova back to the Marvel Universe, while Damian actually ends up getting in a pretty fun little bit here where he says father, only to have both the Writer and Batman answer, because, you know, Morrison is Damian's metaphorical creative father. Hell, the Writer even goes a step further by borrowing a page out of the end of Animal Man by deciding to give Sportsmaster 2 a happy ending wherein his wife is still alive. Aww. Now that's where the main story ends, but of course we get several additional tales. The next one actually involves John Constantine meeting up and joining forces with the Sorcerer Supreme Doctor Strange. Apparently when the two universes fused, the worlds of magic and horror ended up absolutely starting to eat themselves. The rules just aren't compatible, and now you have the likes of Ghost Rider and Swamp Thing beating each other up out there. Oh, what, was using Man-Thing a little too obvious? Both John and Steven are kind of egomaniacs, and before they even agree to help each other, they have to argue for a little bit. John basically says that he's more hardcore and has seen way worse things in his universe than Doctor Strange could ever possibly see in the world outside his window, which is kind of ironic because John is actually a holdover from Vertigo. It appears that John's big plan to try and save the two worlds is to steal Doctor Strange's Eye of Agamotto. Unfortunately, when he grabs it, the power proves to be too much, as it ends up opening his third eye. Strange actually takes a little pity on Constantine, saying that he knows what it's like to be such an egotistical jerk. He was one before, but if they work together and share the load, then they can untangle the worlds like they would if they were doing very hard surgery. And yeah, they do just that, earn each other's respect, and Constantine says that Doctor Strange should check on in with him if he ever finds himself in the DC universe. Now after that, we have a Nightwing, Dick Grayson, and Laura Kinney Wolverine story, and oh man was I waiting for this one because it's courtesy of Tom Taylor, a man who of course had landmark runs for both characters. This one is brief but very sweet. Essentially, Laura was visiting Gotham City when Gabby, her little sister, ended up getting kidnapped while walking their own Wolverine, Jonathan. At first she actually wanted Batman's help, but because he's away, Nightwing will have to do. They do a lot of fun work sizing each other up in their internal monologues, before eventually having a big old fight with Killer Croc. He didn't actually want to kidnap the girl, he only wanted to eat the pet. A decision that Waylon Jones will live long enough to regret because Laura is goddamn scary as Wolverine. Dick gets a pretty good unintentional joke in here too when he sees Gabby for the first time. Oh no, you have bones sticking out of your hands. I always have bones sticking out of my hands. I like your pet Wolverine. I have a pet dog named Haley. One time she got superpowers and talked. Could I see your dog? Of course you can. And yeah, then they all go and hang out with Batgirl at the clock tower, talk shop about what it's like living in the shadows of two of the most famous superheroes of all time, and yeah, that's basically it. Now, the third one is by far the weirdest because it's a straight-up comedy romp between Harley Quinn and the Hulk of all people. I mean, yeah, the Hulk can be funny, but Marvel has really had him going in a super hardcore horror direction the last couple of years. The Hulk also doesn't really say much in this story. He just kind of grunts and growls and acts as straight man to Harley's manic comedy behavior. Weird that they didn't see fit to team her up with Deadpool when they had the chance, but c'est la vie. I guess the one thing they really have in common is that they both don't like toxic waste, either the acid that bleached Harley's skin, or the gamma rays that made Bruce Banner the Hulk. Now, the final story in this collection is the shortest, and that is a damn shame because this is a team-up that I have absolutely been begging for pretty much since I started covering comics professionally. It's Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan teaming up with Virgil Hawkins' Static Shock. And I mean, seriously, if you know your comic book history, you know that Static and everything Dwayne McDuffie did crawled so characters like Kamala could run. They even have one of Milestone's original great artists, Dennis Cowan, drawing this crossover. Which is why it's kind of unfortunate that this one is over so quickly. The idea basically is the universes fuse together, Kamala and Static show up to the same giant monster attack. They butt heads for a little bit before eventually working together and becoming friends. Man, I would have liked so much more out of that. And so that was DC Marvel Batman Deadpool issue number 1, everybody. And at the end of the day, I'm surprisingly more conflicted on this one than I thought I was going to be. I think the first story is actually stronger than the first Batman Deadpool outing from Marvel, or at the very least, I found it to be a bit more narratively compelling. A lot of the stories too in this collection took themselves way more seriously than the stories in the Marvel collection, which basically said, hey, let's just have fun and be silly, where a lot of the stories here actually tried to have a bit more dramatic edge and gravitas than you might think. My biggest problem remains the same though, and that is, man, you know, some of these backups really should have had their own standalone story, heck, maybe even standalone miniseries, as much as I love getting to see all these heroes together. Part of me just cannot shake the feeling of, man, only what could have been. Still though, for what it's worth, I did like this one. In fact, I probably liked it a little bit more than I liked the Marvel offering, which is why I give this one a 7.5 out of 10. Here's hoping this becomes a yearly thing now moving forward. And maybe if DC and Marvel get a little bit more comfortable working with each other, maybe some of these stories actually can get the chance to be longer and more fleshed out. Hey there everyone, it's your pal Cape Joel again, and if you're seeing my face right now, that means you watched to the end of the video, and I'll always be grateful for that. Retention helps in this crazy YouTube game, and so does becoming a patron. If you head on down to the description, you can find a link to my Patreon page. Recently just redid all the tiers, a lot of cool stuff offering up there, exclusive commentaries, exclusive polls, behind the scenes concept art for Capes and Quest, that's the brand new D&D show I've started soon. Never been a better time to become a patron. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month and help the channel grow and, you know, help me continue to deliver content like what you just saw. So I want to thank you all, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.